Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's 1:01 p.m., so we're going to call the October 12th meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee to order. And at this point, I would be looking for a motion to adopt today's agenda. Member Willick, seconded by Councillor O'Reilly. Any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Is there any declarations of pecuniary interest today? Seeing none, we will move right into our public meeting reports. As required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a recommendation on these applications. All recommendations from today will go to the November 1st council meeting. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow the committee to gather information on the applications before us, to hear those wishing to make oral submissions on applications, and to allow the committee to ask questions of the applicants, interested parties, and staff. Everyone who makes a presentation at this meeting is requested to provide their name for the public record. In the interest of time, the committee respectfully asks that you keep your presentation to no more than 5 minutes. When called upon, please turn on your video and turn off your mute and state your name, or come to the podium and turn the mic on and do exactly the same thing. So without anything further, we're going to start with 3.1 on our agenda, Plan 2022-064, Draft Plan of Subdivision at Vacant Land on Kawartha Lakes Road 36 Ops. And I think we have Ian Walker with us.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So this application is an application by Plato Community Lindsay Inc. for a draft plan of subdivision on a vacant lot on the east side of 36. This draft plan of subdivision is opposite Eastview Road. If you see it there on the key map shown on Appendix A. And next slide, please. So the location of it here is the agricultural lot there that is just immediately west of the track that's out behind I.E. Weldon High School, or secondary school there. Next slide. So here's the draft plan. You can see it's a very small portion. It's the entirety of this piece of land, but the applicant also owns several other lots surrounding this one, and back in 2021 had received a minister's zoning order on these lands as well as the abutting lands surrounding this. Next slide, please. So this is a bit bigger blow up of the proposed draft plan, where we have 15 blocks that would ultimately be later on divided through the part lot control provision of the Planning Act. So once they create the blocks, they can then later on build the townhouse dwelling units, and then later on use part lot control to split them into separate lots, we'll call them, for the purposes of conveying them separate and distinct of each other. There are 2 future development blocks on the west side of Street B there, you can see, where it loops to the north and south. Those blocks will deal with some grading issues right now, and then it's anticipated that they could be worked into the existing lots there that are along 36, so that should those lots later on develop or look to redevelop, they could potentially have access from the new subdivision here and remove the entrances off of 36. And just next slide, please. This is the proposed built form they're showing. There's 2 different models here. So just wanted to provide that for your information. Just to advise, with notice being given for this application, we did provide notice to all landowners within 120 meters of the property. A sign was posted on the property. We did have some timing issues with getting the sign posted. The Planning Act requires 14 days for a draft plan of subdivision. We had reached out to the sign company. They had some technical issues with getting the sign prepared, and my understanding is that it was posted. They couldn't get it out at the end of the day on that 14th day, and they had it out the next morning and posted on the property. So we have tried to meet the intent of the Planning Act, but perhaps had just missed it by a very little bit here. However, certainly the Planning Committee can decide that this does constitute the public meeting. A couple things to note with a draft plan of subdivision, because they already have zoning on the property. The draft plan, if council approves it or denies it eventually, none of the neighbors can appeal a draft plan of subdivision. It would only be the owner, applicant, and any agency that can appeal draft plans of subdivision. So I just wanted to point that out as well. And basically, this is just the initial public meeting to gather input from the public, try to make sure that any issues can be resolved. Also allow further technical review of the application. Since writing the report, I've received comments from economic development, from the heritage planner, that just noted that they have no concerns. The proposed concept that you see there ties in nicely with other built forms in Lindsay, and also received comments from the building division that they have no comments or concerns at this time. So I will leave it at that, and we'll await any questions. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ian. Committee, any questions of Ian at this point? Okay, seeing none. Or sorry, Member Barkwell.
Ian, I just had one quick question about the intensification. Does it meet the quotas for intensification for the hectares there? The number of units per hectare?
Yeah, a thorough review has not been completed yet for the number of units. However, I would anticipate that it would, given the 84 units there for the development size, it should meet the minimum requirements under the growth plan for Greenfield development. So,
Any further questions of Ian at this time? All right, seeing none, does the applicant, owner, or agent on behalf of the applicant owner wish to speak to the application?
We do so, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon. My name is Matthew Corey. I'm the land use planner on behalf of the applicant, Flato Development. I'm with the planning firm Malone Given Parsons. Good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to all members of the public. Mr. Walker, I think, did an excellent job. Thank you for that overview, Mr. Walker. I have a presentation as well. I will endeavor not to cover the ground that Mr. Walker has already done. You can see, as Mr. Walker noted on the air photo here on the first slide, the location of the site. And of course, the note, and Mr. Walker pointed this out, IE Weldon is just to the northeast of us. That is a planning consideration, and certainly the remainder of Flato's lands are further to the east. West side, we have existing residents, and then to the northwest, residents as well as a bit of commercial. So I just covered that slide. We've just looked at the proposed townhouse draft plan. Apologize for the scale. I did see Mr. Walker's report, and some members of the public had made comment. It is hard to read. That is the nature of the scaling, because we had to show the entire extent of not just the draft plan, but the easements. So an important point to note here for council and for the public in considering this application. It's only these 3.2 hectares that are being shown in the dark colored that are being proposed for subdivision. The remaining lands remain other lands owned by applicant. However, the provision of a stormwater management pond on other lands owned by the applicant is being accomplished to the southeast, and you can see it on the very southeast portion of this drawing. That is in an ultimate location that we're hoping to have when the rest of the lands develop. So the intent there is to locate the pond with as little disruption as possible to the future. Also, that is where the outlet needs to be for stormwater. So as part of the proposal, there would be easements proposed to allow for the conveyance of the stormwater flows, as well as for the stormwater management pond on the other lands owned by the applicant. This is a blow-up of the plan itself. As Mr. Walker noted, there's 84 street towns. They are 6.1 meters in width at minimum, going up to 7.6 when you or larger when you get to exterior lots and corner lots. There's 3 new public roads. You will note there are 2 circles shown at the end of the 2 roads, one coming out of Street C in the east and one of Street B on the south. Those are temporary turning circles. They're for 2 reasons. One, until the rest of the lands develop, they have to be there for the turnaround of snow plows and other emergency vehicles. But the roads are obviously intended to and anticipate the extension of the urban fabric as the development proceeds. As Mr. Walker noted, the remainder of these lands, and I'm sure as council knows, but for the public's benefit, have been subject to a minister's zoning order, so they're zoned for urban use. These lands are within the settlement area, so they're proceeding at this time, but under the PPS, the provincial policy statement, and good planning principles, we have to anticipate and allow for the extension and continuation of the road pattern and the efficient extension of the settlement pattern. So that's what we're doing with those roads and allowing for them to continue and accomplishing the temporary turning circle on the end of them on an interim basis. One thing I will mention here before I move on, there was a comment raised in Mr. Walker's report, and we had heard this. What about a walkway to I.E. Weldon School? That is something we have heard. We're absolutely interested in having that conversation. We actively debated whether we would propose that at the outset. We did not, for the very simple reason that in my experience, high schools and the school boards don't generally appreciate having access onto their sites that they cannot control. So certainly we're willing to look at that and can absolutely accommodate such a request, but it would be very much so subject to school board comments and their preferences there, just to be clear on that comment. Just very briefly, your official plan designates this site as an urban area and the settlement area. Residential uses are permitted, obviously, and the residential use permissions in the Lindsay secondary plan apply here as well. The Lindsay secondary plan designates the site as residential. The specific location for whether it's low, medium, or high density isn't determined by the secondary plan. It's left to locational criteria. In our planning opinion report, we cover that criteria. I've seen Mr. Walker also has addressed it in his report. We do believe we conform with the official plan in terms of 31.2.3.1.2, which speaks to where medium density development, which this is, should and could be located. Do believe this is a very appropriate site for that, and it's an excellent contribution as a first development move by Flato to have a bit more diversity of the housing stock in Lindsay and add to that by putting townhouses in this location. And then obviously it conforms to the density requirements. That was a question that was just asked, I believe by you, Councillor Barkwell. The proposed development conforms, the density permissions for medium density are 25 to 60 units per hectare. This site achieves about 44.7 units. So it's right in the middle of that, and that's a very typical density for townhouses as well. That's pretty standard what you get when you're doing townhouses. So this is just a sample layout of how things would be laid out. There's obviously 2-car parking, one being accomplished in the garage, one on the driveway for each of the townhomes. The zoning, as noted earlier, there is a minister's zoning order. The zoning standards for the site are established through that order. However, I can advise that based on this layout and the blocks that we're seeking to proceed with, all of these zoning standards are met, and in fact, all of them are exceeded. We're not doing the minimum 4.25 meter lot frontage. That would be more appropriate for, say, a much denser lane-based townhouse product. These are street townhouses, to be clear. The intent is that they're fully freehold in the end, with public streets and fully freehold units. All of the area, obviously, as a product of that is exceeded, and certainly all the yards are respected and or exceeded in terms of what's being provided. The only difference that we're not exceeding is we're not exceeding the maximum building height. There's no intention, obviously, to go anywhere near the 14 meters. The final height will be determined ultimately through the final process, but there's typical heights anticipated here of 2 to 3 story townhomes, which you can see here in these elevations, these sample elevations that have been provided by the applicant and their architect. I won't try to speak to the architectural style because that is not my area of expertise. But the architectural style, I know in terms of the intent, is to be sympathetic to and commensurate with the styles that exist in Lindsay today and in the surrounding area, the brick treatment, the way the fenestration is proposed, very much replicating the look and feel of a lot of the housing that's there already. This is again proposed at a very high level right now. The final design of these is subject to architectural control much later in the process, but very much so wanted to give a feel and a flavor to the public and to council in considering this of what the intended look and where this is headed would be. Again, this is another elevation, slightly different color choices and materials. And that is it for our presentation, Mr. Chair. I'm, of course, here to answer any questions, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, and I apologize that we have Nazi from Flato here. We have Katarina Sliwa and Brian Henshaw in person here from our team to answer any questions of a technical nature that may come up, and we have a few members, Carl Repka most notably, online as well to answer any technical questions that you or the public may have today. So with that, thank you, and we're very much here to hear from the public and to hear from you.
Thank you very much for that, committee. Any questions at this time? Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Thank you, and through you, I'm just wondering, because I heard, and I know some of the lands were zoned agricultural. Is this one still ag lands?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. With the minister's zoning order, they're now zoned under the order, so the order zoned them. So they're zoned for urban uses now. Yeah.
Any further questions from committee at this time? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Calling a third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Seeing and hearing from no one. Committee, what would you like to do? Councillor O'Reilly?
As printed, did you want to read it, or? Okay.
Sure, I can stick handle that for you.
No, I can. But
So
you
I
go
think
ahead.
we've got a motion from Councillor O'Reilly. That report, Plan 2022-064, draft plan of subdivision at vacant land on Kawartha Lakes Road, 36 ops. The Plan 2022-064 respecting application D05-2022-003 be referred back to staff to address any issues raised through the public consultation process and for further review and processing until such time that all comments have been received from the circulated agencies and city departments and that any comments and concerns have been addressed. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Seymour Fagan. Any discussion? Calling the question. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. All right, moving along, that brings us to 3.2, Plan 2022-065, an application to amend the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan at 273 County Road 30, Verlam. And I believe Jonathan is here with us to give us a rundown.
Good day, folks. Sarah, is the presentation up? Excellent. There we go. Thank you. Good afternoon, Planning Advisory Committee. Thank you, Sarah. I'm here today to present an application received from EcoView on behalf of the Thompsons to amend the official City of Kawartha Lakes official plan to facilitate the severance or a severance of the subject land. And here we have a location plan showing it. It is just east of Patterson Road, not too far from Fenland. Next slide, please, Sarah. And here is an aerial of the said property. And one more time, Sarah, thank you. There we go. So here is the proposed sketch of the severance. You can see that the larger property, or the whole property, is about 25.38 hectares, with the severance, proposed severance shown in red there, which is approximately 0.456 hectares. Under the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan, this property is designated both rural and environmental protection. The EP designation applies to a water course that is shown on the consent sketch in front of you, with the rest of the property being designated rural. In order to facilitate the consent, considering the policies in place, an official plan amendment is required. In support of said application, staff received a planning justification report, an agricultural impact brief, and minimum distance separation analysis, environmental impact study, an entrance memorandum, basically detailing that the proposed entrance to access the severance meets engineering requirements. A sketch of the severance, of course, and a couple of surveys, topographic survey and a real property report. From a policy perspective, the proposed severance is on rural lands, as it is neither in an urban nor a rural settlement area. And with that, we consider that the PPS does contemplate severances when it can be considered locally appropriate. From the perspective of the provincial policy statement, staff feel that through the criteria established within the PPS, including the rural landscape and the rural lands, being able to meet infrastructure requirements as well as the MDS, this application meets those. Therefore, staff feel that this application does achieve conformity with the PPS. When it comes to the growth plan, generally the growth plan prescribes policies pertaining to key hydrologic features. So the water courses, the items delineated in the consent sketch and identified as environmental protection. This severance is not within those boundaries or buffers for those items at all. So from that perspective, staff feel that that is satisfied. With regards to the official plan, this property, as I said before, is designated rural and environmental protection. Generally, lot severances in the rural designation are limited. However, as per the report, the plan justification report submitted, contemplating the PPS direction, as well as evaluation of the materials submitted in support of this application, staff feel that this small severance of the lands is something that can be supported. At the time of writing the report, I will note that staff did not have all comments back from technical agencies. Since the time of writing, we have received those. We have one concern from our agricultural officer in ECDEV, who does not support this application. Reasons for not supporting said application are because this severance is removing agriculturally productive land from the ag system, as well as contemplating that there is very much forestry that can be used or accessed on the retained lands. Forestry is considered an agricultural use, and with some bush clearing, part of the retained lands could be used for grazing and obtaining hay. And notwithstanding those comments from economic development, staff feel that the size and scale of the proposed severance and its location right off of County Road 30, this application can be supported. And with the public notice, signage was posted on the site and residents within 500 meters were notified. At the time of writing the report, we did not receive any comments. Since then, or since publishing, I received 2 phone calls. One asking simply about the nature of the proposal, and the other one, again, asking simply about the nature of the proposal. There were no direct oppositions or necessarily supports with regards to this application. As such, The recommendation written in the report does ask for a refer back. That being said, staff are willing to accept a recommendation or propose a recommendation that should the committee feel comfortable with, that it could be moved forward for with amending bylaw to the next council meeting. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and I acknowledge that Beverly Saunders from EcoView, who has submitted this application, is also here for a brief discussion and to answer any further questions.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. Committee, any questions of Jonathan at this time? Okay, seeing none. Does the applicant, owner, or agent on behalf of the applicant owner wish to speak to the application?
I would, thank you. Through you. My name is Beverly Saunders. I work for EcoView Consulting. I'm representing Chuck and Janet Thompson on this application. They purchased this property in order to build a retirement home. There is an existing home on the property, which is the home that's being severed right now. So I would just very briefly like to speak to the comments that were provided by economic development, and also speak to the overall request that's being made of planning committee. So specifically to the economic development comments, please note that, again, we're severing an existing home on the property. So the area that's being severed is a turf. It's a grassed area that surrounds the home. So the characterization that productive agricultural lands are being removed through the severance is, in our opinion, inaccurate. Any lands that have any potential for agriculture, although we would take issue with the statement of productive lands, because we have provided a agricultural impact brief stating that these lands do not support agriculture right now and are unlikely to be productive agricultural lands. Regardless, we acknowledge the comments that have been made by economic development that forestry counts as an agricultural use and that some grazing could occur. But I just want to point out that this severance would not interfere with that because the forest is remains intact, as would the lands that she's referencing in terms of grazing lands. So it's only the area that contains the existing house. We do acknowledge that a new house would be built on the retained lands, and so a small portion of those lands would be used for that home, but it wouldn't be the equivalent of the area that we are severing right now, only the building envelope for a home. That said, we have submitted an agricultural impact brief. We believe we have demonstrated that there is minimal to negligible impacts to the agricultural system or any agricultural uses in the rural area. And it also has demonstrated that we would have no impact on neighboring agricultural uses. With that, I do really appreciate the presentation that was brought forward by Jonathan. So I won't go much more into it other than to say that this has been a long time coming. There were a few studies that needed to be produced for this, and our client is very eager for a decision to move forward. So if there is the opportunity to recommend approval at this meeting, we would be grateful for the committee to consider that. So thank you, Jonathan, for elaborating on that point as well. I think that's it. I'm here for any questions that you might have and to answer any questions that the public may bring forward after I speak as well. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks for that, Ms. Saunders. Committee, any questions at this time? Okay, seeing none. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Any members from the public wishing to speak to the application?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, there is.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, hi, this is Julie and Bruno. We are located pretty much in the middle of that property that because it used to be 70 acres, and I think a while back, they had already divided the property, which is ours now, that is 5 acres. And Chuck's property is around us like a horseshoe. So the only question that I have is that I can see the plan for the new home and the substantial driveway just to get there. On the other end, where the little bungalow is and the property you want to separate, there's a piece of Chuck's land that's going to remain Chuck's, and then there's our property. So I'm wondering if in the future, there's going to be a driveway between that little bungalow and our property that is, just going to his house, but from the other side. Do you understand what I'm saying? Or
Let me
like,
see
I
if,
just wonder if, yeah, go ahead.
let me see if I can get you an answer. Beverly, are you still online with us?
I am, yep. So to answer that question, no, there's no driveway proposed between the severed lot
Yeah.
and your property. The house is intended to be on the other side. So that's where, and there's actually already a rough entrance there. So it would be using the existing entrance. I don't think it's up to standard right now, so it would likely be upgraded, but it's the existing one that's already there. So it wouldn't go through that spot. Yeah.
And it's not likely to change.
No, I mean, that's not in the plans right now. I don't anticipate that being an ideal spot for an additional entrance. So typically you're only supposed to have one entrance per lot. So I can't imagine there being a second entrance being added. Unless I guess you can have an agricultural entrance, but again, I'm not sure that's the best place to be putting it because I have been on the site. So the reason they have the entrance where it is, as you know, being on the property, there's a hill that goes up there. So they're literally just using the existing access way to get to where they want.
It wasn't really existing. He made it a few years back. He made it a few years back.
That's right, but it's roughed in right now, so they would get appropriate permitting. Yeah, sorry.
Which is just beside the property line. You know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah.
So it's a bit unfortunate it's that close because it's, he has a lot of land and I don't know why the driveway is so close to the property line, but that's his choice, I guess.
So through you, Chair, to clarify, it's my understanding they will need an appropriate permit, which will include ensuring, appropriate design and that it's set in accordance with bylaw requirements. So those details haven't been worked out beyond conceptual because right now it's just a matter of severing the lot, but it could be located later in a different location or figure out where exactly that goes. So that conversation can certainly happen with Chuck, or if there's direction given by the planning committee, we can certainly pass that on. But there is, as you said, a roughed in entrance right now. And it is my understanding that the intent was to continue to use that with appropriate permits. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm just going to, I think Director Hawley wanted to make a comment. I'm just going to let him.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Any new entrance would have to meet our entrance policy requirements. Because it's a fairly busy road, we're not looking to have a number of new entrances on there beyond what's really necessary for the development. So they would, to have another separate entrance coming off 36 between this severed land and your property is really unlikely because we want to minimize the number of entrances onto the road. So hoping that helps. Thank you.
Okay, did that answer your question?
Yes, and I would thank you. So But I just wanted to mention that before that driveway on the drawing that was done, we were working with the conservation, the Kawartha Conservation, and we had planted 1,100 seedlings, you know, for the forest connectivity. And then Chuck did that big driveway. So I kind of, you know, was counterproductive to what we were doing with the Kawartha Conservation. So that's why we had a little bit of concern. But thank you for answering.
Thank you for that. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to the application? Anyone else from the public wishing to speak to the application? I'm going to call a third and final time. Anyone else from the public wishing to speak to the application? All right, seeing none. Committee, do you have any questions? Mayor Latham?
I do not have a question, but I'm willing to give you a motion if you're looking for one. That report plan 2022-065, City of Kawartha Lakes official plan amendment for 273 County Road 30, Verlem, be received for information, and that the application respecting the proposed official plan amendment be approved. I don't know the exact wording, but the amending bylaw be brought forward to council for signature, I guess, by the mayor and the clerk, however that's usually worded. So I'll propose that.
Sounds good. Is there a seconder for Mayor Latham's motion? Member Willick, any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you. At this point, this public meeting being held under the Planning Act is now adjourned, and we will move into item 4 on our agenda, which is deputations, which there are none, correspondence, which I believe there are none, and we'll move right into item 6.1, Bill 109, changes to the Planning Act presentation. Director Hawley.
Good afternoon, committee members and members of the public. Is there any way to get it up on that screen over there? Or do you want me to? Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I've been asked to provide this overview presentation that I provided to council a couple of weeks ago. So Bill 109 is a fairly major piece of planning legislation introduced by the current government in March of this year and received royal assent a couple of weeks later. The bill has amendments to a number of different planning statutes, City of Toronto Act, Development Charges, New Home Construction, Ontario New Home Warranties Planning Act, and the Planning Act as well. I'm going to be focusing on the Planning Act changes, as those are the ones that have the most impact on what the planning department does. Some of the other acts don't even apply to us here directly in Kawartha Lakes. So there are about 6 major areas where they made some changes. The main one is the refunding of fees for zoning bylaw amendments and site plan applications if no decision is made within the statutory time frame. So the zoning bylaw statutory time frame is 90 days. And for site plans, it has been increased from 30 to 60 days. They've also implemented a new ministerial zoning tool referred to as the Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator. So that would replace the Section 47 ministerial zoning order for municipally initiated requests. There are also changes to the community benefit charge bylaws. Amendments to parkland requirements in designated transit-oriented communities. These changes don't apply to us, but it's kind of an interesting change that they've provided. There's also some new powers for the minister regarding certain official plan amendments and new official plans. And then there is the ability for the minister to make regulations for the use of securities that are imposed by conditions, by municipalities as conditions of approval. So the big one is really the application fee refunds. So as I said, timelines are 90 and 60 days for zoning and site plan applications respectively. The way it works is if after the 90th day you haven't made a decision, you have to hand back 50% of the fees. If you haven't made a decision in another 30 days, you have to hand back 75%. And in another 30 days, you have to hand back the entire fee. So these changes will be in effect on applications that are made on or after January 1st of 2023. And really the intent is to have municipalities work more quickly and really sort of streamline the decision-making process. Interestingly, the legislation doesn't apply to fees collected by other agencies, nor does it apply to other agencies that are involved in the planning process, i.e., for example, conservation authorities of the province. So they're gonna certainly try to get us their comments as quickly as they can, but we'll sort of wait and see. They're really sort of looking at a 45-day turnaround for one review period. So we've been speaking with a number of different municipalities, certainly in this area, as well as sort of more broadly throughout Ontario. Everyone's tasked with the same thing, so we're going to be looking to see how some of the larger municipalities have implemented this. Some of them already have, and they've actually hired management consultants to do a lot of the work for them. In all cases, it's very interesting. They issue conditional approvals, and then after the timeline, then you finish the process off. That's how they've done it typically. So we're going to be looking at some of those models very closely. The other thing that has really come through all of those reviews is that especially larger municipalities have had to staff up in order to have any hope in meeting some of these timeframes, even sort of post the 90 and 60 days. So that is something that we'll definitely be reviewing in the fall and coming back through PAC and coming through with recommendations and policy changes. So site plan approval, again, it's another major area where the province feels that processes and approvals need to be speeded up, especially when we're starting to look at having housing projects move ahead. One of the major goals of the provincial government is to have a lot of housing built over the next 10 years, and site plan approval is certainly one of the ways in which higher density housing gets delivered. So municipal councils are now required to delegate site plan approval to the staff level. That isn't a problem for us because it has been delegated to staff here since I think 2006. So the director has been able to sign off on site plan approvals. The only change we have to make is there is a clause there that allows exemptions over 10% to be referred to council for approval. So essentially, we're not really enforcing that clause at this time. So if there are any larger exemptions, they would be dealt with at the staff level. Again, as I said, timelines for site plan approval have been extended from 30 to 60 days. Even at 60 days, it really is, you really can't get a lot of approvals done within 60 days unless it's very, very simple application. However, like a high-rise, multi-story residential project usually ends up in the 6 to 9 month time frame. I've never seen anything like that done in 60 days because it's very tough for developers to get the submissions 100% accurate. If they were, we might be able to hit the 60-day time frame, but even then, it's very difficult. So again, the site plan review process is going to be one that we're going to be looking at in great detail. And we've been implementing a pre-consultation process for site plan approval already, because we found a lot of the submissions weren't very good when they were submitted. So what we have asked developers to do is to send us a site plan. We have sent that around to all our different agencies. We've always come back with a large list of the submission requirements. That has really helped speed up the process. However, having pre-consultation now enshrined in the process makes it better for us, and basically allows us to sort of really mimic the pre-consultation process that we have for other applications as well. This and the other processes we're going to be looking at over the fall and coming back with any policy changes and operational changes to our process. Plans of subdivision. So Bill 109 is there are going to be regulations that are put in place by the minister at some point in time to determine what can be implemented as a condition of draft plan approval and what cannot be implemented as a condition of draft plan approval. I suspect that perhaps there are some municipalities that are including things as conditions that may be either difficult to clear or perhaps shouldn't be in there as conditions to draft plan approval. So the minister is going to be looking at all of that in detail and fleshing out in the future what can and can't be included as a condition of draft plan approval. The one, from my perspective, the one nugget that was in there was the ability to reinstate draft plan approval for applications or for draft plans that have lapsed. Sometimes what happens is a developer just will forget to submit an extension request, and then the draft plan lapses. This actually allows us to reinstate it if there is an interest on the city's part to do so, and we have already reinstated one draft plan approval in Bob Cajun, which lapsed for this very reason. The developer just didn't get his request in time. So what this does is allows us to update the conditions, and the interesting part though is that it can only be reinstated once for one time, so these cannot be extended. So that's the trick on these. It's only a one-time extension, so we have to make sure that we put a time frame there that's long enough that say the city needs to do any infrastructure upgrades, we can have a time frame that's long enough that will allow us to do that work and give the developer time for build out. The Community Infrastructure and Housing Accelerator is also a new process that the ministry has implemented. It's intended to, in essence, replace the MZO process and is really municipally driven. So the municipality looks at the area which would apply, and they have to have a draft bylaw as well. And the municipality then passes a resolution for what it is they would like the minister to ask under this new accelerator program. There is also an onus on the municipality to provide notice to the public and consult with various persons and bodies and communities before passing the resolution. So what this process does is it builds in that consultation piece that at times is sort of missing or felt to be missing in the MZO process. So there's a number of different tasks that the municipality has to do. Again, as with an MZO, it does not have to be consistent with the provincial policy statement, or does it have to conform to provincial plans or the official plans. And once the order is issued by the minister, it prevails over any zoning bylaw that would previously have been in effect on that property. So again, this process, once this is approved, it essentially mimics zoning, and there are. I think it seems to be aimed at certain types of classes of projects, so community housing projects, affordable housing projects, or employment, economic development style projects as well. And one of the other things that we'll be looking at over the fall is coming up with a policy on dealing with MZOs and these types of accelerator requests as well. Community benefits charge, again, there were some changes made in how they deal with parkland dedication. The city does not yet have a community benefits charge bylaw in place, so they don't apply to us. However, if we do contemplate that in the future, we would need to follow these rules. So essentially, community benefit charges would replace the parkland dedication process that we have today. So you can either go down this route, or we can put in place new parkland dedication policies and a new bylaw as well, which we will likely have to do as well in the fall. There's new ministerial powers regarding official plan approvals. So there are abilities to for the minister to defer to the tribunal to either make a recommendation or a final decision on how to deal with official plans. And it also allows the minister to suspend the time period in which official plan matters are subject to the minister's approvals. So this has actually already been utilized by the minister in Toronto. There are, I think, there were about 8 or 10 large official plan amendments to the City of Toronto official plan. All of those have now been deferred. Decision has been deferred by the minister, and it's been moved over to the OLT for decision making, rather than having the decision made by the minister. New powers that they have. Finally, regulation making authority for the use of surety bonds. So essentially, these are securities that we take. We typically take them for subdivision agreements, site plan agreements, and consent agreements. And the goal of this legislation is to provide some kind of regulation prescribing what bonds we can ask for. And it will also allow the landowner to stipulate the type of bond that they want to provide in conjunction with the planning approvals. So I guess sort of some final comments. Essentially, the thrust of the bill is really to for municipalities to move faster, get the approvals done more quickly. Or else we have to start to hand the fees back. So essentially do it faster or we'll penalize you. I think that's the sentiment sort of throughout Ontario, throughout planning departments. I mean, there are some good parts in this legislation as well. Again, the accelerator is a process that we're going to have to sort of go through and see how other municipalities handle it as well. Again, I think really the issue really is to look at other municipalities to see how they're doing it. I suspect what will happen is we'll likely be issuing a number of conditional approvals to meet those 90, 60-day timeframes, and then sort of finishing things off. I've spoken to a number of developers, and they're not really fond of the legislation either. They would just much rather we spend our time focusing on processing their applications rather than having to do these conformity exercises. However, it is what it is, and we'll do the best that we can to make sure that we still deal with the applications as quickly as we can, and so we'll be ready sort of next year for this legislation. Thank you. If there are any questions.
Councillor Seymour Fagan.
Hi, thank you, and through you to Richard. So, would you like a magic wand?
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that.
Actually have a question about development charges. I heard that they're looking at possibly reducing or removing development charges for accessible housing. Have you heard anything?
I have heard something to that effect as well, yes, but I haven't heard yet what that's going to look like. It'll be interesting because I guess that's one less thing that DCs will be applicable to. However, I guess someone's going to have to pay for the growth at some point in time.
So that might be the municipality. Who knows? Yeah.
Member Barkwell.
Yeah, I just, about the ministerial powers regarding official plan approvals, and I just wonder, they have put more money, I think they put $10 million into the OLT to hire more staff because the minister is going to be referring more of these to them. What's going to happen with our appeal? Is that going to get bogged down even further on the secondary plans?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, we're still working through our appeals. Obviously, it's not with the minister; it's with the OLT, anyways. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know how that's going to affect our appeals. I don't think it really will. I think there's always ways for the tribunal to find hearing time. We've actually been quite successful in through the last round. We were able to negotiate a lot of it out, and there was very little that we had to deal with on the last round. So I think that we are becoming fairly successful in terms of negotiating things out. So I remain very optimistic that we can, continue on that path, and not need like an 8 or 12 week chunk of board time. So,
Councillor O'Reilly.
Thanks very much, Richard. Anyway, just a couple, I'll give you a motion to receive if you wish at this time. Do you receive Richard's report? Someday.
Seconder for Councillor O'Reilly's, Member Willick. Any discussion?
Just a couple questions.
All in favor?
Okay.
Carries.
Okay.
Go ahead, Councillor O'Reilly.
Anyways, Richard, back to staffing, which is going to be a huge issue, and you mentioned probably the larger centers are going to have an opportunity to have probably consultants, management consultants to handle that. Would you have an early guess that we would be in a situation that we would need to hire those people, or is it too early to predict? And secondly, what does a conditional approval really mean?
So I'll answer the first question. Yes, I suspect that staffing is going to be very, very tight for us as well. And if we're going to try to meet some of these timelines, we may need to come back and ask for more staff. It's just a reality. Although my fear is asking for more staff and not being able to hire the ones that we have vacancies for right now. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword from that perspective. But everybody else, all other municipalities are feeling the same pain, consultants as well. So we're not alone in that regard. To answer your question on conditional approvals, what does that mean? So perhaps for rezoning, it means that you hit the 90 days, but you put a holding symbol on the zoning, and then have a number of things that need to be cleared before the zoning gets the holding gets removed from the zoning. So it could be that there needs to be some more work done on environmental impact study, or some kind of a phase 1, phase 2 environmental assessment. So that could be a condition of removal of the holding, that you have to do that. But we've still hit the 90-day time frame in terms of getting the zoning approved by council. So from that perspective, we keep the money, but then there's another ongoing process that's needed to remove the holding symbol later on. So, I mean, in some cases, zonings are approved with holdings anyways. It may just sort of broaden that scope out a bit more, whereas instead of the holding is subject to, you know, a site plan agreement or subdivision agreement, it's subject to that plus, you know, finalizing some other studies or finalizing comments from some review agencies.
Thank you.
Sorry, just another follow-up. And with site plan approval, it would be very similar. It's actually interesting, when I used to work down in Clarington, we had started issuing conditional site plan approval. So it was, you know, after 30 days, we issued a letter saying you've got conditional site plan approval, you have to do X, Y, Z. I think that's going to be a similar approach we'll take with site plan approvals. In our conversations at the regional or at the county planners table, a number of municipalities have taken that approach, and it's actually been tested at the OLT, and they've agreed with that approach as well. So it seems to be something that, you know, seems to be sort of, let's quote unquote, battle tested at the tribunal. So it's likely something that we would adopt as well.
Any further questions of Richard at this time? All right, seeing none, we've already got a motion to receive, and it's been carried. So that brings us down to the conclusion. Somebody like to motion to adjourn? Mayor Latham, seconded by Member Barkwell. All in favor? Carry. Thank you for your time.